There is a moment in sports history that makes you stop and genuinely ask yourself whether the rules of aging even apply to certain human beings. And Tom Brady is absolutely one of those people. Because what he did in his final NFL season was not the performance of a man winding down. It was the performance of a quarterback who looked like he had years left in the tank. So today we are going to dig into exactly what Brady did in that last season, why those numbers were so jaw-dropping, and whether there is any real argument that he could have played professional football all the way until he was 50 years old. Stick around, because the answer might genuinely surprise you. Let us set the scene first. Tom Brady officially retired from the NFL following the 2022 season, which played out across the 2022 to 2023 campaign with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now here's what makes this conversation so fascinating. Brady threw for nearly 4,700 yards that season. Think about what that number actually means for a second. Most quarterbacks in the entire league would be thrilled to hit that kind of yardage total. These are numbers that younger quarterbacks in their absolute prime are putting up. And Brady was doing it while being in his mid-40s. The man was 45 years old. Let that sink in. For context, the average NFL quarterback retires somewhere in their mid to late 30s. Some of the great ones push into their early 40s. Brett Favre played until he was 41. Peyton Manning called it quits at 39. Those were considered remarkable career lengths for their time. Brady blew past all of those benchmarks and kept going. He was not just hanging around taking a paycheck either. He was genuinely producing at an elite level with nearly 4,700 yards passing in what turned out to be his final year. That is not a retirement tour. That is a quarterback still operating at a high level. So now the real question. Could Brady have physically and mentally sustained his game long enough to play until he was 50? We are talking about 5 more years of professional football beyond where he finished. 5 more brutal NFL seasons. 5 more years of absorbing pressure from elite defensive linemen, reading complex defensive schemes, and maintaining the kind of physical condition that the NFL demands. It sounds almost absurd when you frame it that way. And yet Brady himself planted the seed of possibility in people's minds, and the production he showed made the idea feel at least worth exploring. Here is what worked in Brady's favor. His entire career was built around a lifestyle approach that most athletes simply do not follow. He was obsessively focused on his diet, his recovery, his sleep, and his physical preparation in ways that went far beyond typical NFL standards. While many of his peers were dealing with significant physical breakdown in their late 30s, Brady was finding ways to preserve his body. He moved in the pocket in a way that minimized unnecessary hits. He got rid of the football quickly. He relied on mental processing and precision rather than arm strength or scrambling ability to generate plays. This style of play is inherently more sustainable as a player gets older. Now here is where the tension lives in this conversation, though. Playing until 50 would require something extraordinary. Even with the most advanced recovery methods and the most disciplined lifestyle, the human body faces real challenges by that stage. The wear and tear of an NFL season accumulates. The speed of the game does not slow down to accommodate aging quarterbacks. Defensive players are getting bigger, faster, and more sophisticated every single year. The margin for error shrinks. And the mental demands, the processing of complex defensive looks in fractions of a second, that kind of cognitive sharpness is something that also gets harder to maintain over time, regardless of how healthy you are physically. But here's the flip side of that argument. Brady was still processing the game at an elite level in his final season. His decision-making remained sharp. He was not making the kinds of costly errors that typically signal a player whose mental processing speed is declining. His completion percentage was still competitive, and those 4,700 passing yards did not come against weak competition. He was doing it in the NFC South, in the playoffs, against NFL-caliber defenses week after week. What the 4,700-yard season revealed more than anything else is that Brady had figured something out about longevity that the rest of the football world had not fully caught up to. He essentially created a blueprint for how a quarterback could extend their career well beyond what anyone previously thought possible. And the fact that he was still producing at that level at 45 makes the idea of him playing at 47 or 48 feel less crazy than it would for literally any other player in league history. Could he have physically managed it? The honest answer is maybe. His body seemed to be aging differently than his peers. His throwing mechanics were refined enough that he was not dependent on explosive physical gifts that fade quickly. But there would have been a threshold somewhere. There always is. The question is whether that threshold was at 46, at 48, or whether theoretically Brady could have pushed it all the way to 50. What we do know is that Brady himself seemed to be wrestling with these exact questions. His initial retirement announcement came, and then he walked it back and came back for another season. That tells you something important. It tells you he was not ready to leave. The competitive fire was still burning. The belief that he could still perform at a high level was still there. And the production backed it up. The 50-year-old quarterback scenario is compelling precisely because Brady made it feel like a conversation worth having. No other player in NFL history has forced us to genuinely debate something like this. Before Brady, the conversation about an aging quarterback always ended somewhere around the early 40s at the absolute latest. Brady pushed that boundary so far that now we are sitting here seriously discussing whether a player could have extended their career into their fifth decade of life. Here is the payoff of this whole conversation. Whether Brady could have literally played until 50 or not almost misses the point. What his final season demonstrated is that the conventional wisdom about athletic aging was built on incomplete data. It was built on what typical athletes do with typical approaches to their bodies and their careers. Brady was never a typical case. He treated his body like a long-term investment rather than a resource to be used up, and the return on that investment was a career so long and so productive that we are still sitting here marveling at it years after the fact. The 4,700 yards in his final season is not just a statistical footnote, it is a declaration. It is evidence that the human body, when maintained with extraordinary discipline and intelligence, is capable of performing at elite levels far longer than we previously imagined. Brady did not just change the record books, he changed how we think about what is possible. So could Tom Brady have played until he was 50? Based on what he showed us, based on the production he was still generating, based on the lifestyle and the intelligence and the approach he brought to every single season, the honest answer is this. Of all the quarterbacks who ever lived, he was the one most likely to have found a way. And that alone is one of the most remarkable things about an already remarkable career.